Alright, welcome to Benchmark Fractions, Lesson 2. So now, in this lesson, we're going to be talking a little bit more about more common benchmark fractions other than the ones we talked about in the video, and also to add a little bit more clarification to benchmark fractions and how we're going to use them. So let's again go through and review the definition. That benchmark fractions are common fractions used to estimate fractional amounts or unknown fractions. And remember that common vocabulary that we have for estimating fractions, which is about, close to, or estimate. So those are some things that we can use when we use benchmark fractions for, which is to estimate. You know, everybody knows about how much a half is or how much a whole is, and everybody knows about how much 3/4 is. So those are good fractions to use to compare the fraction amounts. Also 1/4 as well. So now let's look at this first example. Now we look at this first example, we look and we're kind of guesstimating. Now, while we're doing this, one of the things that we can use is we can use models to help us. So I'm going to scroll up. Let me put my hand on a pointer. And I'm going to put my model over here to try to get about the closest I can. And so when I look at this and I use my model, I can say that this is about 1/2. Because when I use my model to compare, that the area that I'm comparing it to is about 1/2. They're almost close to about the same. So 1/2 is the benchmark fraction I use to compare this fraction. Now, let's look at another example. Now, we're looking at this part right here. We're just looking at this part that is shaded. And we want to estimate about how much of that space is taken up. So again, let me get on my hand on my pointer. Let me move my fraction up, and I'm just going to take it and move it right over here. And I can say that this fraction is about 1/4. About 1/4 of that is shaded, because remember, I use one of my benchmark fractions to compare and find this unknown fractional amount. Now, again, we have another fraction that we're looking at, this shaded part that's right in here. And I'm going to slide up, again, one of my benchmark fractions to see about a good estimate of this area that is shaded. So I'll bring up my benchmark fraction. I bring it up, and I can say that it's a little bit more, but it's really close to 3/4. So I'm going to say that this is about 3/4. Like I say, remember, when we're using benchmark fractions, we're using those to find unknown fractional amounts. And then here's our last one. Remember, we're going through all of the benchmark fractions, which is 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1. Remember, those are common fractions that you see all the time, which is why we can use those to help us estimate or kind of round fractions, you know what I'm saying? But so now here's my other one. Let's bring my slider up, and I'm going to say, okay, bring this all the way up. And as you can say, this is the benchmark fraction of 1/2. And I can say that, well, this is about 'You remember, we use benchmark fractions to estimate. And here are some practice problems for you to try. Only 3 of them that you have to go through and try. Make sure you answer those questions in your notebook and bring them back to class on the next day. And that's the end of our lesson.